Hey, Alan. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, pleasure.
So, we just put our 2026 Flex Work Nation report, Earn is the New Borrow, out into the wild. And I'll be honest, I keep getting asked about different things: pay, credit, jobs. But the thing that really stood out to me was the AI section. It surprised me a little.
It's been surprising to many people, including myself, because of some prevailing narratives out there. Yeah, that's kind of everyone's reaction in general, I would say.
Right, because the findings actually cut against the story that everybody has already decided is true.
Right. The received wisdom is that hourly workers are the group with the most to lose from automation, and therefore they must be the most afraid of it. That's the assumption. And when you actually ask them, it doesn't hold.
Give me the top line. What did the survey say?
So nearly half, 48.6%, expect AI to change their jobs. It's not that they're unaware, right? But they see it coming. But among the people who expect that change, the sentiment breakdown is the really interesting part. I would say the largest single group, 44.4%, is neutral, right? And then positive slightly outnumbers negative here, 28.4% versus 27.2%, actually.
Well, that's basically a tie.
It's a statistical tie, yeah, and I want to be careful here because positive edges out negative by 1.2 points is not a result I'd really stick a lot in on a single year of data. If that were the whole finding, I'd tell you it's kind of a coin flip. I mean, we should wait.
But that wasn't the whole finding, right?
No, so the finding is the direction. We have 2 years now, actually, between 2024 and 2025. Positive sentiment went from 22.6% to 28.4%. Negative sentiment actually dropped from 29.9% to 27.2%, and neutral came down too, from 47.5 to 44.4%.
So the neutral pool is getting smaller, which means that people are making up their minds and they're moving more towards the positive side.
Yeah, that's exactly the shape of it. Positive picked up almost 6 points. Negative gave up under 3. Neutral gave up about 3 also. As people move off the fence, they're moving in one direction more than the other, is the takeaway. And in my line of work, in data science, a consistent direction of travel is worth a lot more than a snapshot. That snapshot tells you where people are, but the trend tells you where they're going.
Well, let me push you a little bit on that because that's just 2 data points, right? Is that really a trend? Isn't that really a line?
That's completely fair. And I'd say the same thing if someone brought me this. 2 points is a line. I'd want a third before I'd call it a trend with 100% confidence. What I'd say is that the magnitude really helps. So a 6-point move in a year, it's really unlikely to be noise sized for a sample of this scale, right? And the internal consistency helps. All 3 categories moved in ways that are coherent with each other. If positive had jumped 6 points while negative also jumped, I'd expect that to be a question wording artifact, and that's not what happened.
So, what's your explanation here? Why is this group of frontline flex workers warming up rather than cooling down to AI?
So I do have a hypothesis. I think it's exposure. So in 2024, AI was really just an abstraction for most hourly workers, a thing they read about, a thing that happens to other people's jobs. But by 2025, a lot of them had actually used it. More precisely, they'd use products with it embedded. The scheduling app that matches them to a shift, the voice agent that verifies their skills before they're booked, the thing that tells them what they're going to earn.
And it's helping them. So the fear doesn't really materialize.
Right? It's helping them in a very specific way. It's removing friction from getting to work, which for this population is the whole ballgame. The first real encounter with AI isn't the machine took my job. It's the machine found me work. It found me a shift. And that's a very different formative experience than the one, for example, a knowledge worker you might think is having right now.
That's a really good point, right? The white collar experience of AI is this thing is doing what I do, but that's not necessarily what the blue collar is experiencing.
Right. The hourly experience is closer to this thing helps me to get what I do and what I need. Those produce different attitudes. I don't think hourly workers are more naive than anyone else. I think they're responding rationally to a different setting, right? To fundamentally different encounter with this new technology.
Well, Alan, let's talk about Gen Z because that's where it gets even more counterintuitive.
Yeah. So 51.9% of Gen Z expect AI to change their jobs, higher than the overall number. They're the most attuned to it. And they're also the most optimistic generation about it. But the thing I'd actually highlight is that when we ask them, the cohort splits fairly evenly between optimism and concern, with the biggest group landing in the middle.
So the generation everybody expects to be panicking about AI in their future is not really.
Yeah. They're at worst undecided. And if you think about it, that alone breaks the stereotype. And there's a follow on, right, that I find genuinely useful, which is, when the question is framed around AI improving their own work experience specifically, rather than AI in the abstract, sentiment turns clearly positive.
Well, that's a framing effect, though. Doesn't that make you nervous about the results?
Yeah, I mean, it is a framing effect. And I want to be honest that framing effects are real, right? You can move numbers around with question design. There's no doubt about it. But I'd read this one as informative rather than as a flaw. The gap between AI in general and AI in your job tells you the anxiety isn't attached to the technology. It's attached to the intent. They're not asking what is AI. They're asking who is it for now.
Which is really a question about the employer, not the tool or the technology itself.
Right. And that's the whole thing. They're not waiting to find out what AI can do. They're waiting to find out what you're going to do with it.
Okay, Alan. Well, here's where I want to press you a little bit because everything we've talked about so far is stated sentiment. People telling us how they feel in a survey, self reported. And you're an economist, so you don't usually trust that.
Yeah, I don't particularly. Stated preference is very cheap. Nobody bears a cost for telling a survey they're open minded. I've certainly done so in my time. So the question I'd want answered is whether there's any revealed preference behind it, whether these workers actually behave like people who've accepted algorithmic systems.
And do they?
They already have. And that's, I think, the part that gets missed, right? Meaning it's quite ubiquitous at this point. Across a community of 1.4 million workers on WorkWhile, every single one of them is using an AI-driven product every time they work a shift. We have a reliability model that learns and predicts when there will be a no-show. We have a standby shift system that predicts when demand will form, and we line up shifts ahead of that. And we have Coach, one of the things that I'm most proud of. It's a phenomenal product. It's our voice agent, and it verifies skills up front. And then finally, we're developing new worker money products, including capability for workers to forecast their future cash flow so they can plan around it and they can decide when to work and where to work.
I think Coach is really interesting because Coach is a conversation with an AI. It's not embedded and invisible and doing the heavy lifting behind the scenes.
I mean, it's over, right? A worker talks to a machine before they get booked, and they do it at scale, and they do it without it becoming a problem. More than being a problem, it's an opportunity, right? It's the thing that undoes friction, and it helps identify the best places for them to work. That's about as clean as a revealed preference test as I could design, actually, right? If there were latent hostility to algorithmic systems in this population, a voice agent standing between you and your work opportunity and your paycheck is exactly where you'd see it surface.
That's fair. What else would you point at as evidence that it's working rather than just present?
Right. So two things. We have exceptionally high show rates at about 96%. That's operational output of this algorithmic matching and vetting layer. And it's not what you get from a system where people are quietly resisting. And then the one I care about even more, roughly 80% of new workers find WorkWhile organically through word of mouth referrals. I mean, how telling is that, right? We have an AI driven platform, and all the workers on our platform are telling their friends, come over here.
Yeah, 4 out of 5 making a word of mouth referral, and that's why someone joins WorkWhile doesn't sound like there's a lot of fear of what's happening on WorkWhile.
Yeah. 4 out of 5. And, for me personally, I treat that as the strongest signal in the whole report, actually. People rent into a system they feel is being used against them. Recommending a platform puts your own credibility on the line with someone you know. It costs you something. So a number that high isn't a marketing statistic, although it's a very good statistic. It really reflects a trust measurement, I would say.
So the survey data and the behavioral data actually agree.
Yeah, they converge, which is what makes me willing to take the sentiment number seriously rather than dismissing it as cheap talk. You have these different things coming together that are essentially telling the same story. The survey says openness. The behavior says adoption already happened and people are actively recruiting their friends into it. You have two independent measurements pointing the same way, and that's always worth more.
I'm curious, was there any information from the survey on the skills side? Because that's usually where the AI displacement conversation goes.
So there's one figure I keep coming back to. 38% of our Gen Z workers are working while enrolled in school or training. So more than a third of the youngest cohort is actively building capability while earning. That's not a workforce standing still, waiting to be automated. That's a workforce hedging. And I'd argue that that's the most rational possible response to expecting AI to change your job. You don't panic, you don't ignore it, you go acquire optionality.
Yeah, I got a lot of confidence in Gen Z. They're making some smart decisions. Let's make this useful for the operators who might be listening. What do they do with all of these findings?
So the report lays out four moves. The AI one is the third rail. So let's take it head on. Yeah, I would say fundamentally the guidance is point the technology at the tedious parts of the job: matching, scheduling, onboarding, and verification. You do these things and you're going to remove friction without triggering fear. They're administrative overheads. They're the things that are keeping workers from getting to their opportunities. They're the things that are keeping you from filling your jobs quickly. Point it at headcount and you lose trust. And then you lose the workforce you were trying to retain.
Right. And that's not a moral argument. It's not theoretical. It's an operational argument.
Right? It's operational. It's the bottom line. Trust is a retention input. If your workers believe the technology is aimed at them, your show rates and your referrals both degrade. And given that referrals are the top of your funnel, that's not a soft cost at all. Having referrals plummet is going to be, degrading the top of your funnel and taking away again from your ability to drive fill, drive production. And that's your pipeline. The employers who are going to win with AI are the ones who use it to make the worker's day easier, not shorter.
Okay, Alan, one last question, and then I'll let you go. If somebody needs to take away one thing from this, what is it?
Yeah. So the workers that everyone assumed would fear AI, most are the ones least afraid of it. And they're getting less afraid every year. That's not naivety, that's readiness. It's hunger for empowerment, for more connections to work opportunities, and again, with fewer frictions.
That's a great place to end it. The full report with all of the data, all of the findings is available at workwhile.ai. And the Econ Lab tracks this stuff year round if you want the ongoing version rather than just the balance sheet view. Thanks so much for chatting with me, Alan.
Thanks, Jarah.